is a direct fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And you can see behind me, we have different maps, we have different countries. Ezra, when you're done, come on over and join me. Tell us what's going on. This is very exciting.
This is exciting.
Very
We've
exciting.
just gone online here in the new Lost Tribes Discovery Center, and our assistant Bill and myself were just looking at the Ethiopian Jewish communities, the various Ethiopian Jewish communities, where they are in Ethiopia, what Jewish Voice is doing to form relationship with and minister to those communities.
Yeah, so we're tracking many different Jewish communities.
We are.
And in particular, Zimbabwe, we're focusing on the B'nai Menashe.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about that later on, by the way. We're talking about the Lemba
Right.
Jewish community
In Southern Africa.
in Southern Africa. And what I want to talk about for a few minutes is Ethiopia.
Okay.
And there's specific lost tribes or scattered tribes in Ethiopia that we're not only tracking but involved in. Talk about that.
Definitely. We've actually been involved with the Ethiopian Jewish communities for 21 years now, John.
Wow.
It's amazing. Time flies. There's really three groups, and I know we're going to talk about one in particular today, of Ethiopian Jews. There's a group called the Gafat who live in southern Ethiopia, and Gafat means the blowers, like the blowers of the shofar. And their story is that they marched through Ethiopia blowing the shofar over hundreds of years. And then there's a group in central Ethiopia, including in the Somali region in eastern Ethiopia, called the Beta Avraham, which means house of Abraham. But the main, and we can say the most historic Ethiopian Jewish group is called the Beta Israel, which means literally the house of Israel. Where do they come from?
Okay, so it's a Hebrew name.
Yeah.
The Beta Israel, that literally the house of Israel.
Exactly. It's a Hebrew name and an Amharic name because Ethiopian language and Hebrew, Jonathan, are historically from the same root language.
So Ezra, they're referred to as the house of Israel.
Correct.
By their own community.
Correct.
In Ethiopia.
To this day, by their own community called the House of Israel.
We have the map. We have their locations.
We do.
In Ethiopia mapped. And
Yes.
you can see the surging circle. They're actually mapped in very specific areas of the country, right?
Correct. All the major population centers of Ethiopian Jews in the land of Ethiopia today.
Okay. Ezra, the obvious question, how did they get there?
Yeah.
And then how do we know they're Jews?
Right. It's a great question. And because the Bible is largely silent on how Jewish peoples got to where they are today outside of the land of Israel, we need to rely on oral tradition. But fortunately, we have a little bit of a hint in the scriptures regarding the Beta Israel, the Ethiopian Jews. Tradition has it, and the Ethiopian Jews assert through oral tradition, that Solomon and Sheba, as we know according to the biblical account, the Queen of Sheba comes to see King Solomon in Israel, and according to the tradition, they had a child. The Queen of Sheba returns to Ethiopia, historically called Cush or Sheba in biblical terms, pregnant, and has a child named Menelik, which is a very similar word to the word for king in current Ethiopian language, and that is traditionally the father of the Ethiopian Jewish people, which now is literally hundreds of thousands of people.
But wouldn't that be the entire Ethiopian population then, if that were true?
No, because that was the royal line. The Queen of Sheba was the royal line in the midst of all the peoples of Sheba. And actually at the time, Jonathan, we can see on the map the current political boundaries of Ethiopia. But the kingdom of Sheba at that time extended across the entire eastern seaboard of Africa.
Ethiopians claim we didn't convert from paganism to Christianity.
Right.
We converted from Judaism.
Right. Exactly.
Because of this.
Exactly. The Ethiopian Orthodox Christianity, which is practiced by 30, 40 million Ethiopians in Ethiopia and around the world today, actually owes its heritage to the Jewish faith. It's amazing. Such a connection
So they
between
go
Ethiopia
all the
and
way
Israel.
back. So they claim we go all the way back to the time of Solomon.
Yes.
And so the Beta Israel said we've been here since the time of the Queen of Sheba.
Exactly.
That is incredible.
2,500
Is that
plus years.
supported historically?
It is supported historically. There's always been what we can say is a Jewish hint or a Jewish influence throughout Ethiopian history. And the state of Israel and the state of the nation of Ethiopia today still view themselves as inseparably linked. This connection between the Ethiopian people, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and the Jewish people in the state of Israel. It's an amazing connection.
Ezra, briefly, how do we know that the Beta Israel, these people that identify as Beta Israel, how many are we talking about?
We're talking about, believe it or not, Jonathan, 150,000 living in the land of Israel today, and then between 50 and 100,000
150,000 living in Israel.
Yes, 150,000, Jonathan. And 40 years ago, if you would have said there's Jews in the land of Ethiopia or there's Jews living in Africa, people would have laughed you out the door. And then Jewish community leaders in Ethiopia started standing up and marching down to the Israeli embassy in Addis Ababa saying, we want to go home. We're Jewish. We've never been lost to ourselves. We know who we are, and we want to go home. And through a lot of politics and a lot of negotiating, but really we believe ultimately the hand of the Lord, through 2 airlifts and a lot of immigration in the decades since the 80s and 90s, about 75,000 people from Ethiopia, Jewish people, returned to the land of Israel and then had a generation of kids that doubled the
So as for
population.
someone or a group in Israel
Yes.
had to determine that their claims were accurate.
Yes, and how do you
They're
determine
Jews.
if somebody who says they're Jewish is actually Jewish? You're looking at oral history. You're listening to tradition. You're looking at things like do their traditions and their religious practices align with what we can say are historically Jewish or even biblical Jewish practices? In some cases, like with the Lemba in Zimbabwe, and we'll talk more about that at another time, you're looking at DNA. Does the DNA of the people align? That's the
new
newest one.
twist, the scientific
Sure.
proof.
Sure.
These people have the same genetics as known Jews.
Yeah. And also, sadly but truly, you're looking at persecution. Because people have no reason in a lot of these parts of the world, Jonathan, to say that they're Jews unless they really are. Why? Because all it means is isolation, persecution, and in some cases, death.
You're watching Bible prophecy being fulfilled before your very eyes.
Yeah.
We have to take a short break, but we'll be right back with our Ask the Rabbi segment, where I answer some questions sent in by you, our viewers. And who knows, maybe one of them will be yours. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
As you are learning today, Jewish tribes have been found in Africa, India, and other parts of the world, holding onto their traditions and their belief in the one true God for centuries. However, they're among the poorest and most persecuted people on earth. Today, you have an opportunity to make a change in their lives. When you support Jewish Voice with a one-time gift of $40, Jonathan wants to thank you for your help by sending you the Lost Tribes map, tracing the ancient Silk Route and denoting the location of the Jewish tribes you are helping today. We'll send all of these resources out to you right away as you support Jewish Voice Outreaches with a one-time gift of $40 or more. Your gift will help us share the gospel and change lives for these lost tribes. Call the number on the screen now so we can get these resources out to you today. If you would like your giving to make a long-term impact, Jonathan is encouraging you to join him today as a monthly partner. Join us with your monthly support of just $30 today. You will not only receive the map, but Jonathan will also include this African box plaque, reminding you of the part you are playing sharing the gospel around the world. We'll also send you this beautiful Lost Tribes of Israel photo book, featuring the history and images of the various tribes. You will receive all of these resources for your generous support of just $30 a month.
Welcome back. Well, we received some very insightful questions from our viewers, Ezra.
Yeah.
And they're specifically, these are on the Lost Tribes of Israel, which is the focus of our program today.
Some really fantastic questions. Let's jump right in, Jonathan. Thomas from Riverton, Wyoming asks this. Are the Lost Tribes all descendants of Jacob, or are some just descendants of Abraham?
Yeah, good question. They're all descendants of Jacob. We spoke earlier about Jacob's name being changed to Israel when he wrestled with the angel, and the Jewish people, the Israelites, the Hebrews, are all descended from Abraham through Isaac and Jacob. So the lost 10 tribes are connected to the children of Jacob, and the tribe of Judah, also connected to Jacob, to Israel. All the Jewish people today that are in fact Jewish by blood are physical descendants of Abraham through Isaac and ultimately Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. The tribes of Israel, 10 of them from the north, 2 in the south, all eventually scattered, but a remnant,
Yeah.
and then scattered again in the Roman captivity or with the Roman exile and the great diaspora dispersion. And God has now gathered us back, the children of Israel, or Jacob.
Exciting times to be alive. Brent from Bemidji, Minnesota asks, are there scattered tribes in countries other than in Africa?
Brent, there sure are, and we have worked with the B'nai Menashe in Manipur and Mizoram, India. But there's also lost tribes that we believe are living in Afghanistan, as for the Pashtun
Yeah.
tribe. We're now working with the Yabir and the Yitzhak tribes,
Right.
correct?
In Somalia, Horn of Africa. Yeah.
Somalia, Somaliland.
Yeah.
And then there's others that we've been identifying as
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
correct?
Definitely. All over Central Asia, that historic Silk Route. Jonathan, still Jewish groups, not lost to themselves, lost to world awareness, but they're coming
Yeah.
out today.
Incredible. Yes, scattered
Yes.
throughout the. We were I was in China many years ago and met the Jews from Kaifeng, Chinese Jews.
Yeah.
So God was very thorough in scattering us, but He's also faithful in returning us
Yeah.
back. But not just Africa, we're also working in other places.
Yeah. Jonathan, Robin from Lincoln, Nebraska asks, I heard that the Bible says that the lost tribes of Israel will be found before Yeshua returns. Is that true? If so, where does it say that in the scriptures?
Yeah, well, it says it throughout Scripture. The answer is yes, Robin. The Jewish people are regathered before the return of the Messiah, and that began at the end of the 19th century as Jewish pioneers began to drain the swamps, and then the Zionist movement beginning in 1897 with Theodor Herzl, the restoration of Israel, the land of the state of Israel in 1948, Jerusalem 1967. But what continues to happen is God is fulfilling His promises in places like Isaiah 11:11, where He's regathering the outcasts of Israel, both back to the land and back to Himself. And the Jewish people regathered in their land must cry out, "Blessed is He who comes in the name of the Lord,"
Yeah.
before Jesus returns. In addition to that, Israel must be saved before Jesus returns because they have to cry out to Him, "Blessed is He who comes in the name of the Lord." And that necessitates the discovery of Jewish communities that have been in the past lost and are now
Sure.
being restored. Great question. Now, of course, when Jesus returns, not every last one may be regathered or saved, but He then gathers His elect from the four corners of the world.
Yeah.
Some really good questions. I wish we had time for more. I hope you'll write to us, and maybe one of your questions will be read. Ezra, I know there's a lot of needs out there, and we just want to take a moment as we wind down the program
Yes.
to pray for people. Maybe you're facing a report from the doctor that's